Hello, my name is Michael Tarayon Todran, and I am today's host of the Landscape Architecture podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We have Sandra Vlock. Sandra, can you introduce yourself, please?
Well, I'm Sandra Vlock, and I am speaking to you from Rancho Mirage, California, but I am a Connecticut-based architect and artist, and we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do. I really enjoyed our pre-meeting conversation that we had. I think it was really engaging and exciting, and I almost wish we would have recorded that one. It was so good. But we have definitely plenty to talk about, and I guess let's just dive into it.
Sure.
So you are an artist, and what kind of work are you creating now?
Well, I'm doing work that I would describe as collaborative on one level, which is very important to me, coming from a background of architecture. And communal is a word that I guess I would use, because I'm producing pieces which are installations that inspire gathering and connection. And without sounding like I'm delivering a cliche here, those two words are profound at this moment in time, and it's always been of high value. People like to come together, people need to come together and find some experience to share. And so my work is to create opportunities for that intimacy or connection to nature or place or people. And so that sounds pretty broad as a category.
Yeah, we could dive into bit into the details.
I'll just tell you, just as a quick vignette of well, how do you go from architecture to art or fine art, which is, I think, the depth of the conversation we were having in this interview. I've been an architect have had a practice for 30 years. And most of that work was in the public realm of museums and higher ed, private homes, et cetera, not in the commercial space. And I randomly had an opportunity to create not an opportunity, but an idea to create a non-disposable birthday gift for my brother. When I say non-disposable, I would typically frame up a drawing that I had made or something that I had made as a gift. That was always important. This one was non-disposable because it was 58 inches in diameter steel and weighed 500 pounds. And it was delivered as a surprise for a 60th birthday.
He doesn't live in like a small loft in New York, does he?
No, he lives, this was for a property on Long Island Sound in the village of Stony Creek,
cool.
Waterfront property. Anyway, I repurposed a steel mooring buoy, an antique steel mooring buoy, and fashioned out of it a fire vessel. And what I mean by that is that I created a design that reflected his passion and love of anything maritime. And it was this fanciful design of boats and birds and wide-eyed fish and octopus and I don't know, just whatever came out of my head.
Sure.
That then wrapped around as a cutout design on this mooring buoy and then turned it into what I have called a fireball. And it was, I thought, kind of a one-off, like I did a drawing to create this, which was 18 linear feet. It stretched the entire front hall in my home. And I was working on this for 60 hours. And I know that it took that long because I've always kept a timesheet.
Oh, do you do on your own?
Like my life is a timesheet.
Sure.
I was just working on this for a very long time and sketched this thing out in charcoal, cut out the design because it's this big paper doll that had to be somehow translated onto a three-dimensional surface. Anyway, the one-off design, the birthday surprise, everyone loved it. It was so photogenic that it got published. And that was exciting for me to get this thing published, but in major publications like the Wall Street Journal and Landscape Architecture magazine and so on. But I'm still working as an architect. I'm not thinking I'm all of a sudden going into the fireball business.
Sure.
The thing that was the most thrilling for me about the gift was, one, it didn't get put into a closet, never to be seen again. But most importantly, that it just was it created an opportunity for family and friends to come around. It was just an instant gathering point. And like I've described it as almost like a Venus flytrap. You couldn't help yourself.
Sure.
And plus, fire just animates anything. And anyway, things happen in life where a door opens and you take it, you walk through it. And I realized that creating things like this, these architectural elements, because they exist not just purely in and of themselves, like the object and the landscape, but rather as experiences or moments to share, that this is exactly what thrilled me about being an architect, to create spaces and places for people. And that it also allowed me to work in a more pure form as an artist. And I want to get back to that word.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, you said something that was so provocative to me that it was like, oh my God, I have to think about this more.
What was that? What was it that I said?
Well, in our conversation, you suggested to me that my description of myself as a functional fine artist, or that the work that I was producing was functional fine art. You said,
sure,
you don't need those qualifiers. Why are you using a qualifier that it's functional? And I was sort of like, what do you mean? Why aren't you are the artist. The work is fine art. Right. And I do think that is something to discuss at length, in part here, and to, I think it would be of interest to other people who are in the realm of creativity as we are. Is it, what are we doing? What does it mean to be artists at this level, where it's not just plants, it's not just, filling a space, but it is more distinctive. It's offering something more than the fire pit. Right. It wasn't just a functional piece.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation because, you were so receptive in regards to at least stopping to consider, right? Removing that qualifier. Right. I think that probably comes with 30 years of experience as an architect and being in the world, and with that experience, you develop a skill set of being able to stop and think about a critique, right? When you're young, right? And I'm only speaking for myself, but when I was young, and if I was to have somebody, well, it actually did happen to me where somebody was like, you don't need to qualify the work that you're doing, right? Like, I couldn't hear it, right? Because I was like, it was too difficult of a transition to hear. And the reason why I like that we talked about it is because I think it's safe to assume that many architects and landscape architects identify themselves early on as artists, right? And they end up in the field of architecture or landscape architecture because either they could draw or they see things a little bit different. Mm-hmm. What I noticed was the inverse in my history. Was at first I started out as a fine artist, and then I became a landscape architect, right? And then my peers are all now architects and landscape architects. And then I would see them do all these beautiful, amazing fine art pieces. And they like so many of them just never owned it, right? Because their lineage was first architecture. And I'm sitting there, I'm saying, no, you're an artist, you're making art, you're making great work, like own it and just, lean into it. And some do and some are never able to jump that gap. And so the reason why I was so excited to talk to you again and record it was like, you made that leap, like and I'd want to hear about that experience, and then of course your work, and we'll get into the details and all that stuff. But so how's it been going?
Well, let me just say that since so much of my work as an architect was in the realm of museums and galleries, sure. And especially with university art museums, I always think it was amazing. The first thing on a campus tour, aside from a student center or something like that, would be the art museum, because there was a lot of prestige around an art museum. And really, if any city or any place you ever travel, it's all about that. These cultural places that are, they're so special and so coveted. But there's no, in terms of university or college art museums, it's not like they have an alumni that are putting money towards museums. They go to other disciplines. And there was always kind of a contradiction where, well, this is the most important thing on that campus, but it's never well funded. And I think that translates, or has translated, for most of the art world. I mean, there's always the top of the pyramid. Same thing with architecture. The starchitects,
right? Sure.
Who are typically designing their product, and it's not necessarily a collaborative exercise. This is sure. What I do. That creativity is not as valued as one would think. And so when you're asking me now, well, how's it going? I'm actually seeing a very positive shift in, let's just pick one area of outdoor space, and the value of the experience of outdoor dining, or any place that people can come together in this world safely, and where it's got to be more than a fire pit. Is there something more? And what I've been hearing, and today I had yet another conversation about this from an architect who practices in LA and in the Scottsdale, Phoenix areas, that working in the realm of hospitality, they're constantly, and especially now, looking for something that can enliven a space in a creative way, which contributes to the experience of that environment. And this is what artists do, capturing more than wall space. It's capturing our imaginations and contributing enormously to what that experience is. So for me, as a functional fine artist, these pieces that I've kind of tapped, like, okay, I'm going to design a fire pit that's repurposed from a mooring buoy. How cool is that?
It's very cool.
But it wasn't an abstract design.
Sure.
It was a design that was really very personal in terms of the context of the Long Island Sound, the personal story of one man's passion for the sea.
Right.
And I've translated that into innumerable places, whether it's the high desert and creating imagery that really belongs in that place. The Joshua trees, the road runners, the snakes, and all the critters that inhabit that world, the the whole experience of stars at night. That is the story that I'm telling for that place. And so it never gets old. These are not just abstract designs, but they're very contextual and personal. And the thing that I'm looking for is how to connect us to that story, connect
right.
to one another into that story. So back to the functional. So one is the fire pit, what can we do about that? And I've been working on another idea called a fire totem, which is reimagining the ubiquitous patio heater, the thing that is basically everywhere, that offers absolutely none of what I've just described. It's just purely functional. But for obvious reasons, it's become so desirable. I think on the scale of toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic, it's like that's the number one thing on the not a wish list, the need list.
Sure.
And so how do we take something like that and now break out of the box of where creativity and function can really support one another?
Let's mention your website now, which is Studio Vlock, which is studio VLOCK.com. So people can look at your work while
see what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah. One thing that was very serendipitous was that, your medium for the fireballs are mooring buoys. And, I was on a buoy on a buoy tender for, for 2 years, repairing buoys, maritime, and all across the Pacific, all across the South Pacific. And it was funny, like, when would you ever get a chance to have somebody to interview you that actually knows a lot about buoys? Like, when would I ever be able to talk about my knowledge about buoys again? Like, it's such a super niche skill set that I have.
Yes, it is.
So like, I understand how they work and how they're anchored and how to clean them and, all of that stuff. So it was really funny that that's the medium that you're using.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful, and I'm glad that they're being repurposed. And what's cool about the way that you repurpose them is once you remove the positive spaces to create a negative space, then you reutilize the positive, like, leftover spaces that were cut out with the plasma torch, right?
So I've been doing that too. It's it's so interesting. It's like, what's the leftover? What can I do with that?
Yeah.
And so that's something that I'm playing with and finding a lot of opportunity. The other thing about the fireball and other things that I've created that exist in the outdoor environment, not only are they three-dimensional, but they create shadow spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And which is unlike really most things that we think about when we're, placing furniture outside, or we're trying to, create interesting outdoor dining settings or whatever it is. The daylight is a big part of what I think about all the time, just as an architect, orientation. But shadow expands the design so fully, so that they are installations, because they require, or they consider what the surface around it.
Sure.
is.
Yeah.
And so
So what's fun for me, and probably the audience as well, is we're talking a lot with architects who are now exploring the outdoor spaces more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun to see your guys' journey into ideas of shadow and movement and stuff, which is what we've been exploring for such a long time and talking about and writing about. And so it's really, I applaud you for recognizing that and capitalizing on it, and creating like these beautiful objects for the landscape, because there is considerations, like you mentioned, like the surrounding hardscape, or what texture is it, what color is it, what do you have?
And in landscape design, of which I have a great passion for, and really thought that I would begin my career in that realm. I worked with a master Japanese gardener, actually a woman, an American woman who studied with a master gardener in Japan. And I had studied Japanese gardens at Harvard, and ended up working for this woman, Julie Maservi, who is still in practice and a good friend. The lessons that I learned from studying with her and working with her, things that I think your audience would certainly recognize: the borrowed landscape, these sort of destinations, the visual destinations. That's also something that I work with. And because it's important to have these moments, to create these moments within the outdoor space, that your eye rests there, that you have a sense of scale. All of those things are very important. What happens, just seasonally. So it's these things that I'm creating are giving me an opportunity to go back into that part of my life that I was so interested in, that they're not landscape specific. These two worlds are sharing the same challenges, right?
Correct.
Because especially in Southern California, or in environments like I'm in now. Where are you now? You're in Utah?
I'm in Utah now, yeah.
Okay, I don't know what the circumstances are, but there's a big blurry line between outdoor space and indoor space. And it doesn't just stop with these sliding glass walls.
Right.
I mean, that's one idea. And certainly that inspires architects to, for example, you're talking about, what the hardscape is. Well, I've designed many houses where the flooring on the inside just keeps on going to the outside.
Oh, that's the best. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've used teak floors that extend out to the exterior as teak patio spaces, with the sliding glass wall. But now we're talking about living space that is so critical, and it's not just for the moment. I've been having a lot of conversations recently with people who are, I'll say, restaurateurs, because that's a big concern for restaurants and, let's say, wineries, their tasting rooms, is, what are we going to do now where it's all going outside? And the high points to these conversations have been, well, we're beyond the orange cones that are just like taking over parking. We're beyond that.
Yeah.
I think we've gone beyond the ficus hedge.
Yes. Yep,
there are patio heaters out there. Now maybe we'll have a little sort of, tented convenience. And the money that has been allocated beyond the orange cones is now a serious investment that's not going to go away. So, for example, yesterday I was talking to someone who designs, an architect who designs for resorts and restaurants. We were talking about shutters on the beach. And I think most people, know what I'm talking about. It's beautiful, wonderful, but there's actually not a lot of outdoor space there, which is remarkable when you think about it. I've stayed there a few times, and I remember there was just a place to have breakfast outside. And the only outdoor area that is available to shutters is the valet parking and the boardwalk. Well, guess what? They've taken over. That's exactly the space that they're inhabiting. And this fellow is telling me they're not going to give that up.
Right.
Forget about the valet parking anymore. they've really begun to invest in that space out of doors as a permanent feature. And it's been booked solid. People love it. Well, who wouldn't love it? And so how does that invite landscape architects, artists such as myself, anybody, to rethink what the boundaries are of what we can do that is now become not just nice, or wouldn't that be nice, or the last thing on the as a line item, but an essential component to the success of that business and what it can offer to its visitors or guests. That's how I'm looking at it, and I guess why I'm feeling it's not just a sense of optimism, but
sure,
that there's a whole new pathway that's been created. And
I think there's going to be amazing opportunities for collaborations between interior designers, architects, and landscape architects to really unite and create these spaces, and everybody using their skill sets to the fullest. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about specifically was your experience as an architect and the logistics and the project management that you've had to do certainly must come into play with the work that you're doing now, right? These mooring buoys, I would imagine starting at 1,500 pounds?
No. Well, not quite, but they're heavy. It's not like
they're heavy, right? But the logistics and the relocation of them, and the details and all of that. So, how have you been able to apply your experience into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a hobby of mine; it's a business.
Sure.
And so, I'm feel like the making it all work seamlessly. You're asking if somebody is buying, let's say, a Fireball, well, how do you get it there? What are this, how do you make this work as a business model?
Right.
Is that part of the question? So there are a lot of
absolutely.
a lot of parts. It's the fabrication, how to resource the mooring buoys, how to ship them, whether it's to Bermuda or to Palm Springs. It's just understanding the whole chain of events and streamlining it. So that's a big part of what I'm doing, which is not artistic. It's the practical of making that work. What degree of art handling for a piece like this? And frankly, it's not much. You put it on a Fireball, you put it on a tire, strap it down. But no, I think the business side of what we do is really important. I'm not sure at what level you want me to describe all of this, but certainly finding an inventory, a cache of these mooring buoys was a challenge in and of itself, because they don't make them anymore.
Right.
It literally has become the flotsam or jetsam. I don't know which one.
Jetsam is when you throw it over. Flotsam is when you bring it on board a ship. See, okay. There goes my marine experience.
Well, anyway, and so I've certainly been delving into the whole business side of things. Yeah. For example, the fire totem, which I'm trying to bring into a more reproducible realm. But Fireball is a one piece at a time, handcrafted. A fire totem are these reinvented patio heaters. They're all made in the same place in China, same factory. If you're a distributor here, you get from 9 to 12 at that factory, and then from 12 to 3 at somebody else. And, keep your fingers crossed they're not stealing your ideas. But the key there is how many get put into container ships So it's the packaging of these things that is the critical piece. And then the distribution. So there's a whole aspect of trying to make this, I'll say, trying to make the margins as the artist to make that work. And that's the piece that I'm really working on now, to see how can I take my idea and truly make it available to more people.
Sure.
At a larger scale, more than 1, 2, or 5.
You're talking about like a product line that's repeatable and streamlined and efficient.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So in my ideal world, whether it's a restoration hardware or a restaurant group or a hotel brand, that the work that I'm doing is so customizable. But how does it play into an already established budget for these items? Or how can we take 50 of these patio heaters that some company or venue already owns and change them?
Sure.
Create this new environment with pre-existing materials. In other words, it's just adapting to what is. So I'm working on that, and even on the production side of things, I had originally imagined this patio heater as an entire sleeve, which I think it looks amazing and beautiful. But on the practical side, the option is to just create the panels and have them produced in China along with the patio heater itself, so that it is one complete thing that doesn't need to be tinkered with.
What about liability concerns, right? Like making sure that whatever coating they have is non-flammable, the distance, how they heat, like all of those types of concerns probably need to be addressed.
There's anything that I'm doing does not change the functionality at all. It's just replacing a cover and using the same materials. So I'm not involved in any of those things, nor do I want to be.
No, you don't.
Getting into the UL approved or any of that. No, not at all.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. That would be, sounds like a nightmare to do all of that. So cool. So we know that you're doing the fireballs, and we know that you're doing the heaters, and that's your two main areas of focus right now. Well,
I've got a whole range of things that I'm doing, whether it's shade canopies and gates and screens, and that are I won't say similar in design, but take the whole idea of integrating design into the landscape or the hardscape. And I'm looking for opportunities to collaborate on the things which really define those spaces. So it's not like I have a product line. Basically what I've created is a more than a sketch portfolio, because we know how far that gets. I mean, we've all done, these presentations and proposals, or the projects which are never built but imagined. I've gone the big step further, which is I'm going to produce this thing.
Of course.
And I'm going to make it.
You seem very content. You seem like you're doing something that you love. That's what comes across to me when you talk about your work right now.
That's a nice thing. I think about what you just said. I think that to be very honest about how I feel, definitely feel like I'm in a realm that I can do this. I can do every aspect of it. The thing that I have no control over is how profitable being an artist in this way, how profitable I can be. And that concerns me. I'm not just me on my own. I have a family that, you know, like everybody else. And it's hard to bring money into the picture, but that's the piece that would kind of make me sweat.
Yeah.
Like if I was talking to my dad, he'd say, "Well, so how many have you sold?" You know, Dad, I'm, and it's true. You know, how do you make this thing work? And I think maybe that's what you were asking me. You know, beyond being an artist, how is this a business? And so it is this combination of handcrafted and also a digital file that you know. But I am very happy with the choice that I've made to shift from a very established business as an architect. Even as a small firm, we were competing at a pretty high level, especially with cultural institutions like museums. It's a niche.
Sure.
And to all of a sudden move from being very recognizable, both personally. I want to say in the past tense, but I still have a house in Connecticut. I live on the shoreline near New Haven, which is where Yale is. I mean, there are more architectural firms where I live in Boston, New York, and so it's a very competitive arena. But I think this is really an opportunity for me to be fully expressive and to take that simple sketch, the person I've always been, and to realize that there is value in that. And there's a lot of engineering and other things that go into figuring out how to design these pieces. The collaborative aspect of working with very talented people in the field of ornamental metal, of working these interesting, I'll say, niche jobs that are kind of a lost art form of production, and creating these art pieces. To me, it's really satisfying. I just even figuring it all out, the whole process. We are process people, right?
Sure, correct.
And as you said, we're process people that have to work with other people. So it's not like I'm just creating things to satisfy myself. I'm trying to tap into what is it that people really need. And so when we opened up the conversation talking about places to commune, gather, I mean, I do feel like I've somehow landed in a sweet spot, so to speak.
One of the largest frustrations that I've always had in being within the artist community was that I felt so many artists really struggled with the idea of commerce within their work and what it means. And that's where I think that you have an advantage coming from architecture, as you understand billable hours, you understand, all of these systems that are already in play that you could roll into it. And some of my peers within the art world varied, right? All the way from the ones who sold pieces to the $200,000 range to those who sell in the $500 range, right?
Yeah.
And what I noticed is the artist who took ownership in regards to the more they understood their finances and the more they understood the business side of stuff.
Yeah.
And then even some like me who actually fell in love with the finance part of it, as seeing that as almost like a performance piece on its own, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I get this passion project and how do I monetize it without losing my artistic integrity, right? Like that's the big thing. And those who felt comfortable within their own skin in dealing with the business, are the ones who tended to be really successful. And one big growth moment for myself as being an artist and a selling artist was I dealt with so many different artists that struggled with this whole commerce part of it. And then I went and saw Jeff Koons talk at a lecture, and this dude owned it. I mean, he walked on stage and he had an Armani suit, and he was perfectly presentable and tailored, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And, you know, he was in a real harmony between business and fine art. And, you know, that's, I think, one of the secrets. I mean, he makes great work. I be a fan of his work. You might not be, or other people might not be, but what is undeniable is what he's been able to do within the art world. And so when I hear you say that you have concerns about that, about, you know, some concerns, which you should, everybody, any business you should be concerned about.
Let me not say concern. Sorry. I'm going to say it's a goal.
A goal, yeah.
It's not a concern because nothing past tense. I don't need to prove myself in the same way that I did with every acronym after my, you know, every
right, sure.
I need AP, that, you know, goes on and on and on. All the, you know, it's a never-ending thing. No, it's a goal for me, and you're making me think of something I want to share with you, which is
please.
Earlier on in our practice as architects. We were working on a museum project in St. Paul for University Art Museum. And it was a 3-week workshop in the dead of winter, I might add. What do I know about how cold it is in the Midwest?
In St. Paul specifically.
It was super cold. At the end of the workshop, we were to present, my partners and I, this would be my husband, and our third partner, Richard, and I. We were to present our design to the board of trustees. Well, we get into this, it's the president's home with a beautiful conference room, and there's, in front of us are assembled are a group of men, and I recall kind of all white-haired white men sitting there, and I stand up to present the scheme. And there was a obvious and collective, like, why is she speaking? No, it really was one of the, and because there are a lot of women in the field of architecture, but not, and this still persists, but not in a role that I was playing, which was as the foreground to the design team. And this wasn't the only time this happened, but it was really striking to me at the time. And I felt like it was the moment when I realized that I had to own that room.
Yes.
In the way that you're describing Jeff Koons, with his Armani suit and, just owning it, because it was so unexpected at that time. And it comes to mind now as we're talking, because when you're saying you don't need a qualifier, I am now, I think, feeling more at ease because I'm prepared to own what I am bringing to the table as an artist. And I hadn't before. I've been doing this now, this Studio Vlock, as I call it a venture. I don't know what else to call it. This new phase of my creative life. It's taking me 5 years to really feel like, God damn it, I am going to own this. And it's exactly, I don't need to justify it. I mean, not everybody loves Jeff Koons.
Correct.
But if he was standing up there, questioning his own self-worth, probably wouldn't get as far as he did. Correct. And I don't know if this applies to women in this field in the way that I'm describing owning the room of, with the board of trustees sitting there. But that was my role. That was my natural role within the firm.
Yeah.
And so I think that your point about ownership in the creative space is a very important message.
It's very important, and I love having conversations like this with people like you, because I hear you, but more importantly, what I hear or what I see is young women listening to this and saying, wait, I don't have to wait 30 years into my career to own these spaces now, right? Like I could listen to Sandra and I could be like, wait, I don't have to wait anymore, right? Like times are changing, and like they could own spaces much faster and demand it.
Hey,
right?
Look at Billie Eilish.
Yes, I love her.
Sorry.
I'm so glad that you brought her up. She's the best.
I mean, that might be the most stunning example in the last 500 years of someone who's just like, she owns it.
She owns it. Her and Lizzie.
She owns it in a way that everybody wants her to own it.
Yes, yeah.
I completely, maybe I don't know enough, but from what I know, I so admire what's happening for her and her brother, whose name I'm going to forget right now. But I mean, they are a force, a brilliance, a creative power that has no limit. And
it's beyond her ownership, like the talent and music is fantastic as well, right? So it's the whole entire package, right? Like,
I've worked for a lot of prima donnas, and I don't mean women. I'm saying that I've worked in my experience in architecture. I've worked for people who think that they are, quote, and I won't say who, but the Cartier of architecture, which was when I decided that I think I'm going to go off on my own.
Yeah.
Where I don't think that there's a lot of bandwidth for that, of people being.
I think that age is dying. I think that it's dying. I think we're seeing the last of the prima donnas, because now there's so many talented people out there that if I could get a different skill set or a different style that's just as gorgeous as somebody else's, but they're going to be easier to work with.
Yeah.
And, I'm just going to go with this person, right? There's no, I think the scarcity back in the day would allow that to happen. But I think those days are over.
It's so interesting. And I don't know if it's because of, there wasn't a scarcity. It's just that we didn't have, I'll say, even social media or a way to know, who is
that's right.
all the talent. I mean, there's just as much talent. It's just that now we can see it all.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. That's a good way of.
I think the way to summarize what we were talking about is that creativity has always been undervalued, even though it's the first thing on the campus tour, so to speak.
Sure.
That's one. Two, women in the creative world are still having to confront I'll say a bias or what's she doing?
Sure. Well, look at Crystal and Jean-Claude. Are you familiar with their work?
Of course.
So she fight.
She never got recognition.
Until way later into their
How about Denise Scott Brown? Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
Well, do you know of Robert Venturi?
I do.
Okay. Denise Scott Brown, his partner and wife.
Sure.
Never got the AIA,
right?
Gold medal.
I think Eames came pretty close early, right?
Yeah,
I think they were
Ray.
I think they were on the forefront of recognition, both equally early on. I hope so, from my understanding.
But for your audience and our audience, as I'm sharing the screen with you right now, I think this is the golden age of what we do collectively, the outdoor world, the outdoor realm, and it's super important to be recognized for the value that we bring to creating important spaces, necessary spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I really see, I could really see landscape architects reaching out to you for your lookbook and the fine artwork that you do offer, because it seems like it would be such a natural fit for you, to connect with landscape architects, because oftentimes we're the ones specifying these types of, I can't tell you how many fire pits I've designed. I mean, it's gotta be literally well over 100 fire custom pits, easily, maybe even in the 200 range, from my residential work to all the way to commercial. And so it's something that we deal with all of the time. And I would think that, if I saw your lookbook, and I had the right client in mind, I would say, hey, give me a quote, give me a price. Like, let's see let's run it by, let's put it in our, let's put it on our image board and see what they say.
Well, the thing that the tagline underneath all of that would be, what else can we imagine?
Correct. Yeah, sure.
Put a fireball in water. I mean, there's so many things that I would love to do. I am by nature a collaborator, whether it was working with a structural engineer or a mechanical engineer or a metal fabricator. There are so many great ideas which come from this synergy. And that, I would love to do work that reflects the place,
what I love,
and not just a brand, but so that it just bringing whatever skill sets I have to work within the narrative that is, that's the point of it all, whether it's, right? It's about
what I love about collaborations, and I'm focusing so much of my business now to work in collaboratives. And what I love about collaborations is, one, I think what everybody loves about it is capitalizing on other people's skill sets, right? But another thing that I love about collaborations is it really takes a lot of emotional weight off of me. So if you and I were to collaborate on something, the ownership that you would have in it and the ownership that I would have in it reduces the weight that I have to carry about thinking about everything, right? So I probably could, there's a lot of collaborations that I'm involved with where I probably could do everything by myself, right? And so when I say the weight being reduced, it's not just, oh, okay, like they're, handling the renderings or they're handling this. It's more of the intangible weight of like, okay, I got somebody there who at night is probably thinking about it as I am, somewhere else. And,
well, there's, more than that, it's an interesting strategy that I would say was fundamental to our work as architects. Absolutely fundamental. Number one is that A, it's never about you. And B, that when you can get people to own it, either to have their, like their fingerprint on that, the idea, a collective idea where each person feels like, well, I own, it's not just, that was my idea, but it takes on importance in a way that you couldn't have done on your own. In other words, if it was, for example, an art museum on a college campus, and the people who were participating in the design of this went beyond the director of the museum and several other people that would be in control of a project development, but included the whole community that might have some interest in it.
Sure.
So it's that collective vision and ideas that wouldn't have been generated if you're only thinking about it in a very sort of one-dimensional way, the building program.
Right. Yeah.
And so to translate that into some of the things that we are doing, it's to say that, well, you can't tell somebody it's of high value. They have to know it themselves. And when you participate in the process at whatever level, it has high value because it's a reflection of that person, of that owner, of that place. It becomes, it takes on more significance, and it's a shared celebration when it all works. In a shared commitment.
That. Yeah, I love the idea of the shared celebration of it, and it's also shared liability as well, which is
right.
important in a way of not just like a legal liability, which of course that can happen, but just the liability of like the design, right? Like, will it be good, right? Like the liability that it has to perform and it has to like be beautiful and functional and all of that too. So everyone has a vested interest in it working.
Right. So to what you're saying, in terms of the professionalism, that's super important. And
I guess I could have just said that.
No, but we can get into the details of that. If there's a proposal that's made that it's attached to time and it's a serious projection of cost, it's really elaborating on all those things in writing. I mean, I have contracts for everything. I mean, if that's where you're going with it, that's just because, like me with the timesheet, how long did it take you to make that? People ask me things like that all the time. Well, I've definitely streamlined from 62.5 hours to something that now I know what I'm doing. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So you keep a set of data that informs what your margin is, the cost of production. And so, it's like, I didn't give that away. I think it's been difficult for me working through this. I started, had a good fortune of being picked up by a gallery in Napa. And I didn't even know how that happened. I was walking through and I was curious how artists were represented there. And I happened to have, very unusual for me, a little brochure, a little card, a 5x5 card that I had made that showed images of Fireball. And I just handed it to somebody. Next thing I know, literally 24 hours later, I got a call from the director of the gallery inviting me to consign with them. As exciting as that was, what I didn't understand at the time was how to work within an established culture of percentages.
Yes, yeah.
And the 50%, I was going through, well, if it was 40, 60, because I'm looking at the sunk costs of producing these pieces. One, acquiring the ball. Two, the sunk cost of what it costs per plasma cutting by others. Not even counting my time. And it was just, it's not profitable. And then the only way to make it profitable is to then cause the piece to be out of reach financially for people. So that's an important piece to throw out there, is that know what you're getting into and what's the best platform. And I've moved away from that model.
Right. Well, let me touch on this. I think this is a really important thing for us to talk about, because I anticipate there's a lot of probably young artists that will be listening to this that are either architects or landscape architects. And by young, I don't mean young in age, but young as wanting to move into the world of fine art, right?
Yeah.
So I understand what you went through in regards to, I guess let's call it sticker shock, right? In regards to like a gallery wanting to take.
Yes, it was sticker shock, right?
All right. So first I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about my experience with that, and then I'm going to offer a perspective on how to look at it. So when I was doing these curations, and I was doing them in Los Angeles, I was doing them in Las Vegas, and a lot of artists that I had in my exhibitions were very established artists that understood the whole 50% game, right? So you put that number into your work, right? Into your spreadsheets and what you want out of it and so on and so forth, right? So then I went to grad school at Ohio State, and I said, well, I'm going to produce a show here because I'm in Ohio and I might as well. I connected with the gallery, I got the space, I reached out to all of the artists, and really late in the game, I put out an email to all of the artists in the gallery, or it was actually just a space that I had acquired. It wasn't a proper gallery, but it had hardwood floors and beautiful lighting and all that stuff. So I made it into a gallery. What happened was I reached out to the artist and I said, okay, here's the contract forms for the 50% of my cut. And a lot of the artists had never shown before, and they freaked out. The guy who owned the space reached out to me and he said, how dare you, you're unethical. And I said, oh my God, I didn't realize that I'm in a different market, and the artists here don't realize like that's the way the game works, because on my end as a curator, it's a lot of work, right?
We do all the marketing.
Yeah. So and also, I mean, the owner of the space and myself actually almost even got into a fist fight because he was so angry, right? It was really intense experience. And so I said, okay, why don't we do this? I said, how about this? I said, I'll waive the 50% fee, whatever I sell from this to my contacts or whoever buys, they get 100%. But let me at least reach out to all of the artists and say, you can voluntarily give me 50% of anything that I sell for you, because it was such a mess and I did the paperwork late into the game.
Oh, okay,
and
that's fair.
I said, let's just do this so that way we don't have to cancel the whole entire show. 90% of all the artists said, I get it, I understand your value, your role in this, and they signed it. And 10% were like, no, I want to keep it all. So for me, that experience, and I came from 7 years before that of selling it, no problem, getting my 50% and all of that. So to bring it back to everything, so I don't think that you or anybody else listening here has to avoid the gallery scene, because I think it's important to be in both, right? So in today's world, unless you sign like an exclusive contract with the gallery, in today's world, in today's art market, there's plenty of space to be both an independent artist and sell your work and get 100% of the commission. And then there's also room to create a different line, right? Specifically for galleries and for the ultra high end, right? So if you're worried about your work not being accessible to people and you want to keep the cost down, that's fine, and you create a line just for that. But there's nothing that says that you can't have, I'm just going to use this word because people will understand it, but the branding would be cheesy if you did. But let's say like a platinum line, right? So you would have Sandra Vlock, your line, your independent, your social media, your ownership of it, and then a different line that's...
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Another way of thinking about this, and I'm using the word margin, not like this is a word that slips off the tongue, but it's something now I understand what that means, because now I'm thinking about or working towards pitching some of what I'm doing to on a commercial level.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of risk there if you don't know what you're doing.
Correct.
Meaning that, oh, great, I got an order for 250 of these things, and guess what? I'm going to make 10 cents on each one.
Yeah.
Because the production, the cost of all the different things that come together, plus back to the 50%, the Targets of the world or the whatever, that's standard. That's standard. Yeah. And so it's just a cautionary thing. I agree with you that there's space in both, but I'm also feeling like more empowered, as I think most people should be, that all the talent that you just referenced, like, wow, there's so much more talent. There's not more talent now. It's more visible. And so there are other platforms to be recognized in. But it's not to suggest that with the right partnership, and this is not just need to do your homework, the right partnership of a gallery or an art consultant or whoever is representing you has earned that money, has earned that percentage, because they are really going after it or speaking on your behalf. It's difficult to hand off that part of somebody speaking for, I'll use myself as an example.
Sure.
Somebody speaking for me. So of the thousands of, it's not too far off of an estimate, of the very many proposals that I was responsible for, RFPs, RFQs, which would take weeks to prepare, I would always write it myself. Nobody else could write this.
Sure.
It's a lot of work. I'd love to have said, God, I really don't want to spend my Thanksgiving, writing this proposal. Yeah. Like, couldn't someone else? No, because it's my voice. It had to reflect the tone, the culture, whatever of the firm. That's what we were selling. We're a design firm, not a production firm. We were selling us as personalities and so on. And it's the same thing with finding a partnership, the right partnership, whether it's a PR consultant, that's another important realm, an art consultant, a gallery. It's a relationship that you have, and it's important to recognize when it's working and when it's not.
Yes.
So I've gone around the block on several of these in both fields of architecture and art, and I feel like right now I'm incredibly lucky to be working with a PR, which sounds like a bullshit term to a lot of people. It's like, what do we need that for? Oh,
not me.
Like the most essential thing. Like, if I have any money, it's going to PR, because why? I actually don't have access to that community of people in quite the same way. But if it was the wrong voice, if it wasn't projecting the me in all of it, it wouldn't be the right fit. And so it just, sometimes that's hit or miss, or just having the experience to know not only is it the right person, the right approach, but the level to which you have to invest yourself in all aspects of it. Not just a week, a monthly meeting, a recap, but I know that I personally ask for a lot of time from my PR professional, because I think that it's it's strengthened the relationship and allowed me to be, to rely on them to speak for me.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever really been in a position where that's worked.
I love it's interesting that you mentioned the PR firms, because I am just now really starting to understand their value. For the last couple of years, the most pleasurable experiences I've had doing the podcast is when I'm dealing with a PR firm that's representing their client, because I get to see what they do. Like, so the PR firm reaches out to me, say, we have a client we think would be a great guest, and I see everything that they do on the back end, right?
Yeah.
And how much better the episodes are. And then another component of it too is it just allows you to be heard and the reach. And I was so fascinated by it that we did a whole episode just on PR firms for architecture.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so that's going to be released pretty soon. But since you mentioned so much about your PR firm, do you want to give them a shout out? Yeah.
Yeah, Christine Anderson.
Yeah.
And Maggie Diamond.
Maggie Diamond, that's a perfect name for a PR person, right?
Yeah, they've been incredible partners with me over the last year in it's communication, arts, and design, plus design is the name of the firm. They're an LA-based firm, and it's more than a shout out. It's like a, thank the Lord, Hosanna, or whatever it is. It's like I'm going to do a little dance here. I feel like I'm. It's not just well represented. That I'm taking this step, not alone. Yeah. But with people who really hear what my aspirations are and how to direct all that energy in a way that's going to be productive and necessary. It's a funny thing. The when I mentioned how the Fireball, the birthday gift, got published.
Sure.
Like, why is that? Well, because I had posted it as photographs on our website, AKV website.
Sure.
And at the time I was working with a PR firm, an LA and New York based PR firm. And my interest was in getting, 4 other projects published. And just as a fluke, they just sent this thing around. And it's like, It just took off.
Yeah, so, one thing that I learned about PR firms is the one big value that I saw in working with PR firms for architects and landscape architects. And they, if for the smaller firms out there, there's packages that work for smaller firms as well. Because a lot of people think that PR firms are only for big firms, and it's not the case. But one value that I really saw in a PR firm was that, yes, they have the contacts, right? They already have the contacts, but the beauty of their contacts is that they're already vetted, right? So a good PR firm, if they propose something to a publication, the publication already trusts them. They say, okay, you know what? We've been working with you for the last 10, 15 years. We're probably going to run your story as long as it fits within our narrative and blah, blah, blah. But it's not a pitch. It's not a sell. It's just saying, hey, I'm running across something interesting.
So here's another aspect of that already vetted or well-known. I've been talking about this conversation I had with an architect. Well, his name is Eric Peterson. And this was a Zoom cocktail hour call last night. This is the person that I spoke to about Christine Anderson when I was deciding whether or not, my background check, so to speak, who says exactly what we're talking about. And as a encouraging me to contract with communication arts and design. And so last night, the call lasted more than an hour and a half. I'm probably sitting in the same position, except for all of a sudden, there was no light on me.
Yeah, sure.
It got dark. And the value, again, to someone who has established, it's not just contacts, but relationships within, in this case, the creative realm of architecture, landscape architecture, the art world, whatever it is, those categories, it's like having a dinner party and saying, why don't you bring someone and I'll bring someone?
Yeah.
It's this sense that, it's going to be a great combination of people because we all kind of know each other. And there's a sense of trust. And I'm sure that Eric wouldn't have agreed to talk to some random person for an hour and a half in the course of a really lucky for him, very busy time. But it was a good fit. It was a good fit because we were both known. It was going to be an obvious, great conversation.
Right.
And for me, the value for me, and I hope for him as well, is that we came away with some inspiration and also potential opportunities to help one another. To be introduced to someone, in my case, because this is a new, the community in Southern California is not well known to me. And so that's where I think and the value added is these relationships, whether it's in the publishing world, which, by the way, is alive and well in the print publication realm, is become more important for whatever reason. And in networking, especially now when we're not just meeting each other at openings and cocktail parties, which are awkward to begin with. It's the one-on-one. It's you and I meeting each other and saying, oh my God, we have so much to talk about. So interesting. And it wouldn't have come about without this facilitator, I would say.
If I would love to share a first-person experience that I had with seeing what because we're talking about PR, network, and vetting, and the connections. And I wanted to share a first-person experience that I had. I was on a residential property, and there was an NDA, so I can't say who, what, or where. But there was an artist that was commissioned to design sculptures throughout this really large property. And this sculpture was being represented by a gallery in New York. They were a New York-based duo, right? The gallerist and the artist, right? And we are in the landscape, right? So I'm the one giving the tour to the artist and the gallerist on this huge property.
Yeah.
And with that tour is also the person authorized to sign off on all of these sculptures. Okay? So there's me, my coworker, the artist, the gallerist, and the representative. And we're walking through the site, and we're climbing up hills and stairs and going through different spaces. And the artist is pitching to the client all these different spaces where his or her work could be, right? Okay, let's put a piece here. Let's put a piece here. Let's put a piece here. And as I'm walking through with my landscape architecture hat on. But mind you, I identify as a fine artist, right? So I'm also secretly wearing those eyes. And I'm seeing the representative approve sculpture after sculpture after sculpture after sculpture. And I think we ended up, by the time the walk was done, almost 30 approved sculptures in this space, right? And I'm going back to this because I want to go back to that 50% margin. This artist is actually getting what he or she wants. And then the gallery is then adding on the 50% on top of it. So they're getting full price. And now this person probably made, I couldn't even tell you. I think the pieces run, $25,000 to $30,000 a piece, and getting 30 approved right there on the spot. You do the math.
Yeah.
Right. And that is less likely to happen at that scale without like that representation. So when I feel like I'm like really pitching hard in the paint for gallerists and curators and stuff, because I've been able to see what they do. But
we're saying the same thing. We're saying that what's of greatest value is the relationship.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Whether it's a gallery or a art consultant, which really that's what a gallery does for the most part. They've got repeat clients that come to them, but now they've got the physical. What I'm objecting to in part is a little bit about the value of the physical space in some instances. where that diagram is changed. People are, adapting to a different circumstance. But the relationship is extremely important because one, it establishes, it's the professional relationship. So, the piece will get there, it'll be of high quality, it'll get there on time, right? All of them will get there on time. The person is going to be like, well, I can't, I can only do 2 a year or whatever it is. I'm vouching for this person. I'm vouching for this person on lots of different levels. And also being able to speak for the client in terms of their aspirations of what people may not be able to articulate in walking through that outdoor space, what they really wanted. They're not being sold something, giving what's being done is creating an opportunity to satisfy whatever the goal or aspiration is. And that's exactly where you'd want to be. It's perfect. And so that's essentially what we're saying with a PR firm or, another entity within this, these essential relationships that we all have, where it's not just being able to speak in your voice, speak for you, but to reach out to a community of people that there's already an established relationship with, that you can kind of skip the preliminaries. Let's just get into it. We know we've touched on all those bases. So you're right. I think it's an important thing to talk about in the no matter where you're starting from. I was trying to remember how I was described at the beginning point of Studio Vlock, and I think it was a mid-career.
Oof.
I don't know why it's like mid-established. I was like, what is that? And I think what somebody was trying to tell me, first of all, I thought, like, what are you talking about, midlife crisis?
That's what it sounds.
No, that was an actual positive statement because it meant that I've already done the professional work. So that was an asset. So like, oh, well, this person knows how to run a business.
Yeah.
This is not just somebody who's like, well, I like doing, I'm going to make these things and I don't really know how much it costs or if I can do more than 3 a year. It was a mid-career artist or something like that. I'll have to go back and look.
Sure.
But it was a positive thing. I already have a resume. Somebody can say, oh, well, she's done, There's a reliability factor there. But for people who are starting their careers without all of that, it's I think our message is don't shy away from not only the details, but the whole financial foundation of what you're doing, what you're trying to create. And by the way, having a spreadsheet, a projection is not, it's worth it the day that you create it. And then it's all aspirational because you really never know.
It's funny. I really love talking to you about this because I've been doing that since day one. Whenever I'm doing quote unquote a passion project, right? I have people tell me, oh, don't worry about the time and don't worry about that. Like, it'll just scare you. And I said, no. If I really love my passion project and I really value it, the best thing that I could do for it is to make it financially viable and financially sustainable. Because here's the things that are going to happen if you don't. One, either you're going to get burnt out, right? And you'll be like, oh, we had a good ride. I made these beautiful pieces. Or you're going to keep going it and your spouse is going to get burnt out and be like, why are you spending all these money?
Why are you doing this?
Going out, like emotional bandwidth, mental bandwidth, and financial bandwidth making these pieces. I appreciate that you scratched an artistic itch, but it's no longer sustainable. And then people just let it go or resentment builds. And it doesn't have to be the case. Like, you could have both. You could make something that's passionate and financially financially viable and everybody's happy, right? And my big thing is, and you could do it all without losing your artistic integrity, right? Like you could, there's nothing that says that you can't have it all, right? And it's already been figured out. There's people doing it now for a long time.
You know, the irony is that when you think about other fields, whether it's, you know, your cousin who's a surgeon.
Sure.
Do you think he ever had to justify how much it costs to do any number of procedures? Absolutely not. You go to the dentist, that's what it is. You know, nobody ever asks you, well, you know, geez, or questions the financial side of that service or that professional, whatever thing. They don't. And architects typically do. They'll try and negotiate at some level. And by the way, there is no, if you want to hire an architect and we're wondering how much should a project cost or what is the hourly compensation, nothing uniform about it.
Nothing.
Very locational. It's very, I mean, it's kind of amazing. And so we would all try within the architectural profession, try and figure out what somebody else is billing.
Sure. How to sneak that question in there.
Like, you know, what do they bill? You know, you try and make sure that you're not pricing yourself out of the market unless you're a diva and you can get whatever price you want. But I've often been advised in what I am doing, as desirable as it would be to sell more at less, and maybe that would have been smart, you know, this is like, you know, sold more, but to not to undervalue what I'm doing.
Right. Now, you know, when I'm going to say this, and I know right away that you're going to understand what I'm saying, and that is that design is not linear, right? There's never been a design process that I've been on, even though I've done the same, you know, similar scopes, it's never linear, right? And the same with your art career. It's not going to be linear, right? It's not going to be like, okay, I'm an artist now, and then this is going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, the fluctuations in price and what you're doing and scale, like, it's not going to be linear. It's going to have to flesh itself out, right? Which is what you're doing now. Now, I know we mentioned a lot about divas, but I do want to backtrack just a little bit and say that there's still room, and actually very important, to have architects that have an extremely strong aesthetic skill set or construction skill set or something. For an example, so I do photography for architects and landscape architects, right?
Yeah.
And I was brought on as an assistant to shoot a Tadao Ando piece in Malibu, right? And I jumped on that. I would have done it for free. I would have paid to go and photograph. I would have, if he said, you have to pay me $300 to go shoot this, I said, here, what else do you want? Anyway, so I get to shoot this piece, and it really, the house was a work of art. It's almost like a feeling of sublime in that space. The way that it really is, and it's concrete, you know? And then the beauty of it was, because we were the photographers, we had full unlimited access, and even in the garage, to open up the panel in the subsurface to access infrastructure, even those panels had a Fluter edge. And even like below it was all designed. It was not like, here's a facade and then now this is back of house. Every single thing, and how he made that space warm was just unbelievable. My mind is still blown about that experience. And here's the funny thing about it. The houses next door to him are in the $15 million range. So one's 15, the other one was 20, of course, because we went to Zillow and we looked it up and we're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And this house was $75 million. So from 75 to, let's say, 20, right, to the neighbor, where's that $50 million coming from? And that is because it's an art piece.
Singular art piece.
Yeah. But
And
it's a house.
that's an interesting to sort of carry this thing over into like, people are looking at real estate like crazy right now.
Sure.
And in real estate parlance, the comparables, well, some things really aren't comparable. I'm sorry.
Right.
You can, well, let's go through it. Okay. It is 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths.
Sure.
And that's where the comparison ends.
Right.
Maybe it's the same school system, but you get you get something that is so beautifully crafted and so extraordinary as an artistic expression. That's not being a diva. That's just being exceptional.
Exactly,
the diva thing that I was talking about was this idea. That's what this is what I do. And where there's no room to participate in the creative process.
Sure.
And that's just an attitude about if you're a process-oriented person or not. I've worked on projects where even though they may be the surface areas for art, they don't work for the art at all on that surface because it became more about the architecture rather than what it was intended to do. And that strikes me as being, more than, unfortunate. But you're right. There is always an audience. It's not just for the price tag who can see those details. And I'm sure that you and I and anyone listening here would agree that it is all in the detail, in the quality of the thinking behind it and the execution. And if you don't value that, if somebody doesn't value that, there's no amount of convincing or explanation that is going to get them over that hurdle. Well, I could get a fire pit for $99. Okay.
Go for it. Yeah,
do it.
Sure.
Yeah. Why is there this big variation of just houses that are a lot of square footage, as if that is really translates into value? Doesn't.
Yeah.
So we're stuck in a place where those things matter, and there are probably fewer people who would agree with us. We have to operate in that realm.
Yeah. Well, hey, I think I could talk to you all day. I love talking with you. I think we naturally just jump around to all kinds of really cool stuff. Do you have any closing thoughts or ideas that you wanted to share?
Well, one, I feel exactly as you do. I mean, these having these one-on-one opportunities to just dig a little deeper and talk about the personal experience behind the thing. Because we've talked more about ourselves. And isn't that what people are interested in? You think about how you present yourself, really want to know who you are. That's where artists have a bigger opportunity than other fields, other professions, other aspects of our lives. It is all about the backstory. And so I just have loved sharing our collective stories and histories, and that you've given me an opportunity to talk about the things that I hope for myself. So,
yeah, it's a pleasure talking with you. I'm really excited to follow your work and to introduce it to landscape architects that could put it on their concept boards. And again, your website is studiovlock.com, and that's studio VLOCK.com, and people could check it out. And I'm looking at the work, and it's just so gorgeous and beautiful. And
I'm a California girl right now, so
yeah.
We'll see where that goes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.